Hi everyone. We're taking a look at the second part of Lesson 1, which deals with denial. This is the first principle of Celebrate Recovery, where we realize I'm not God. I admit that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. Step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. Romans 7, verse 18. The last time we were together, we considered two questions. Firstly, am I going to let my past failures prevent me from taking this journey? And secondly, am I afraid to change, or what are my fears of the future? In answering the first question, we learned from Hebrews 12 verse 1 that God has a particular race, a unique plan for each of us, and also that we need to be willing to get rid of everything that impedes our running. For many of us, our past hurts, hang-ups, and habits hold us back, trip us up. Many of us are stuck in bitterness over what someone has done to us. We continue to hold on to the hurt, and we refuse to forgive the ones who had hurt us. What we discovered was that holding on to that hurt and not being willing to forgive the person who hurt you in the past is allowing them to continue to hurt you today in the present. It is tripping you up and holding you back from experiencing God's best for you. If you want to be free from your past hurts, hang-ups, and habits, you need to deal with your past bitterness and guilt once and for all. That doesn't mean ignoring the past. You need to learn from your past, offer forgiveness, make amends, and then release it. In answering that second question about being afraid to change, we discovered that if we fear the unknown, or because of our despair of what we've done, we are in real danger of closing our minds because we think that we don't deserve any better. We were reminded of 1 John 4:18, which reads, "Where God's love is, there is no fear, because God's perfect love drives out fear." So tonight we're going to look at what denial actually is. Before we can take the first step of our healing, we must first face and admit our denial. Do you find yourself wearing a mask of denial? Well, as soon as you remove your mask, your recovery begins, or begins again. It doesn't matter if you're new in recovery or have been in recovery working the steps for years, denial can rear its ugly head and return at any time. You may trade your addictions or get into a new relationship that's unhealthy for you in a different way than the previous one. So this lesson is for all of us. We have a saying around here: denial isn't just a river in Egypt. But what is it? Well, denial has been defined as a false system of beliefs that are not based on reality, and a self-protecting behavior that keeps us from honestly facing the truth. As kids, we all learned various coping skills. They came in handy when we didn't get the attention we wanted from our parents and others, or to block out our pain and fears. For a time, these coping mechanisms worked, but as the years progressed, they confused and clouded our view of the truth of our lives. As we grew, our perception of ourselves and our expectations of all those around us also grew. But because we retained our childish methods of coping, our perceptions of reality became increasingly more unrealistic and distorted. Our coping skills grew into denial, and most of our relationships ended up broken or less fulfilling than they could have been. Did you ever deny that your parents had problems? Did you ever deny that you had problems? Well, the truth is, we can all answer yes to those questions to some extent. But for some of us, that denial turned to shame and guilt. Denial is the pink elephant that is sitting in the middle of the living room. No one in the family talks about it or acknowledges it in any way. Do any of the following comments sound familiar to you? Can't we stop talking about it? Talking only makes it worse. Or if we don't talk about it, it'll go away. Or how about, let's pretend that it didn't really happen. Or, if I tell her that it hurts me when she says that, I'm afraid she will leave me. What about, he really doesn't drink that much? Or, it really doesn't hurt when he does that. I'm fine, really. They drink more than I do. Have you ever said, she's been married 3 times, I've only been married twice? Or what about, I eat because you make me so mad? Or if you didn't nag me all the time, I wouldn't. And you can enter whatever that is there. Or what about, hey, look, babes, I have a tough job. I work hard. I need a few drinks, so relax. It doesn't mean that I have a problem. Folks, that's D-E-N-I-A-L, denial. As I said earlier, before we can take the first step of our recovery, we must first face and admit our denial. In Jeremiah 6 verse 14, we read about how Judah was in such bad spiritual decay and they were experiencing the consequences of it. But the leaders of Judah were pretending like things weren't that bad. They kept promising that everything would be all right, but there would be no peace because of Judah's sins. Let's read that together in Jeremiah 6 verse 14. They dress the wounds of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. And we are no different to them. In our denial, we too have tried to heal a cancer with a bandage. What then are the effects of our denial? That brings us to tonight's acrostic. And you'll get used to having acrostics each lesson. We look at the main theme and we discuss different points. And an easy way for you to remember those points is by remembering the acrostic. The D in denial stands for disables our feelings. Hiding our feelings, in other words, living in denial, freezes our emotions and binds us. Understanding and feeling our feelings is where we find true freedom. Seneca, the Greek Stoic philosopher, said, "To be enslaved to oneself is the heaviest of all servitudes." And in 2 Peter 2 verse 19 we read, "They promise freedom, but they themselves are slaves of sin and corruption. For you are a slave to whatever controls you." There were teachers in the church who were promising freedom, but they themselves were slaves. It is like a 140-kilogram man selling diet books. Slavery occurs whenever one is under the control of some influence, not just some other person. For me, the basic test of freedom is not what I'm free to do, it's what I'm free not to do. I'm free not to take that drink. I'm free not to give sway to my impulses. We find freedom to feel our true feelings when we find Christ and step out of denial. Just as a gifted musician finds freedom and fulfillment putting themselves under the discipleship of a great artist or an athlete under the discipline of a great coach, so the believer finds true freedom and fulfillment under the authority of Jesus Christ. The next letter in denial is E, which stands for energy lost. A major side effect of denial is anxiety. Anxiety causes us to waste precious energy dealing with past hurts and failures and the fear of the future. As you go through this program, you will learn that it is only in the present that positive change can occur. Worrying about the past and dreading the future makes us unable to live and enjoy God's plans for us in the present. We let our fears and our worries paralyze us, but the only lasting way we can be free from them is by giving them to God. Listen to what Matthew 11, verse 28 to 29 says. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. You'll find rest for your souls. Being weary implies toil, and burdened implies endurance. The one refers to the weary search for truth and meaning and for relief from troubled conscience. The other refers to the heavy load of doing stuff that gives no relief. If you will transfer the energy required to maintaining your denial into learning God's truth, a healthy love for others and yourself will occur. As you depend more and more on your higher power, Jesus Christ, you will see the light of truth and reality and experience true rest for your souls. Let's move on to the N in denial. Denial negates growth. We are as sick as our secrets, and again, we cannot grow in recovery until we are ready to step out of our denial into the truth. God is waiting to take your hand and bring you out. The Bible says this in Psalm 107, verse 13 to 14. Lord, help, they cried in their trouble, and He saved them from their distress. He led them from the darkness and deepest gloom. He snapped their chains. This psalm was written to recount how God delivered His captive people when they cried out to Him. God had set them free. He provided freedom for those held in captivity because of their sins. Charles Wesley wrote a wonderful hymn called "And Can It Be That I Should Gain?" Now, I'm not going to sing it for you because you will flee for the hills. But what it says is this: long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. You have been held captive for so long. You need to recognize your captivity and cry out to God. As you travel the road of your recovery, you will come to understand that God never wastes a hurt. God never wastes your darkness. But He can't use it unless you step out of your denial into the light of His truth. Denial also isolates us from God. Adam and Eve are a great example of how secrets and denial separate us from true fellowship with God. You remember the story? After they sinned, their secrets separated them from God. Genesis 3 verse 7 tells us that Adam and Eve hid from God because they felt naked and ashamed. Of course, good old Adam tried to rationalize. He tried to justify things. He said to God, hey, listen, God, actually it's your fault. You know what? If you hadn't given me this woman who gave me some of the fruit from the tree, then I wouldn't have done this. So actually, God, it's your fault. And then, of course, we know that Eve justified and rationalized her sin by saying, hang on, actually, it's the serpent's fault. You see how they were in denial? So first Adam tried to blame God, saying, the woman you put here with me. Then he tried to blame it on Eve. She gave me some of the fruit. Remember, God's light shines on the truth. Our denial keeps us in the dark. We read, God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with Him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus His Son purifies us from all sins. Our denial not only isolates us from God, but it alienates us from our relationships. Denial tells us we are getting away with it. We think no one knows, but they do. But while denial may shield us from the hurts, it also keeps us from helping ourselves or the people we love the most. We don't dare reveal our true selves to others for fear of what they will think or say if they knew the real us. We must protect ourselves, our secrets at any cost. That's what we are thinking the whole time. So we isolate ourselves and thereby minimize the risk of exposure and possible rejection from others. But at what price? The eventual loss of all our important relationships. What's the answer? Well, we read about the answer in Ephesians 4, verse 25. Read there with me. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. We are all part of the body if we are believers in Jesus Christ. We form part of the church. In other words, when we lie to each other, then we are hurting ourselves too, because we are part of that body. Remember, it is always better to tell the ugly truth rather than a beautiful lie. Finally, denial lengthens the pain. We have the false belief that denial protects us from our pain. In reality, denial allows our pain to fester and grow and to turn into shame and guilt. Denial extends your hurt. It multiplies your problems. Truth, like surgery, may hurt for a while, but it cures. God makes this promise. In Psalm 147, verse 3, we read, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Tonight, I encourage you to step out of your denial. Walking out of your denial is not easy. Taking off that mask, I know it's hard. Everything about you shouts, don't do it, it's not safe. But it is safe. It's safe here at Celebrate Recovery. Yeah, you have people who care about you and who love you for who you are. People who will stand beside you as truth becomes a way of life. Jesus tells us, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Step out of your denial so you can step into Jesus' unconditional love and grace and begin your healing journey of recovery.